Everybody, welcome into Carps Corner once again, and like to thank everybody for watching here, subscribing. Appreciate all the support. If you guys have any comments, any questions, anything you want to, find out, you want answers to, I'm here for you. We can do that via messages left here on YouTube. BCarp3 on Twitter, Bobby Carpenter, Roman numeral 3 on Instagram. Whatever you want to do, find a way. I'd love to answer all your questions and give you insight into sports as I kind of see it. And, I'm not saying that my view is the right view, but I'll give you the best educated guess on things that I can, and at least call it as I see it from my experiences and the things that I've been a part of and the people that I know and the people that I talk to. So try to give you a little insight there. So whatever you guys want to find out, whatever it is you want to know, feel free to reach out. I'm always here. I already got a couple comments, especially on some of the Buckeye stuff. We'll be doing another, the little Buckeye update here. Try to do those, weekly through spring ball to kind of keep everybody abreast and kind of what I'm seeing, what I'm looking at, and how some of these guys are progressing and what we ultimately have to look forward to if you're an Ohio State fan, at coming up this fall. So pretty excited with all of that. And like I said, thanks for all the support. Started doing this a couple of weeks ago, on my own, and pretty excited to kind of see where it's going. Going to start working in having some guests too as well. So, maybe get some of my old teammates, AJ, Hawk, Schlegs on here, talk a little bit, chop it up, have some fun, lighter, more entertaining stuff. Then also try to get some guys, in tune with Big Ten football, guys with the NFL, who can kind of talk and share some of their insight into some of the different areas as well. So trying to do all that. Like I said, appreciate all the support and everybody that's been behind that. With that being said, some more news in the NFL, big stuff happening contract wise. And this has been kind of, the year that it feels like the off season, like the massive guarantees and the massive deals. Not quarterbacks have obviously been at the forefront, but one of the other positions has been wide receivers. And for a long time, wide receivers didn't necessarily get paid, and they always had these stats. And I'll have to go back and look this up where, I don't know if it's still the case, but it's probably pretty close. And it's only happened a couple times where the leading receiver in the NFL had never won a Super Bowl. And so people use that argument as why pay receivers? Well, the reality is now you're paying your quarterbacks $40 to $50 million a year, boatloads guaranteed. You're paying, it was always pay the left tackle, pay the offensive line, protect those guys. And that was true as well. And now with the proliferation of all these different receivers, you're usually having 3 on the field. You're spending a lot of money in that position group. And if you have a dude who's a difference changer, since it's a matchup game and it's really tough to guard those guys defensively with all the rules, now you start to pay that guy. And in lieu of that, you don't even pay the running backs. The running back position now on a franchise tag basis, I believe, is the second lowest per position value on the franchise tag. I think it's second only to specialists. Tight ends might be right there, but it's close. Wide receivers have skyrocketed. Because you're paying your quarterback all this money, he needs to have weapons. As good as the quarterbacks are, they need to have someone that can ultimately win in one-on-one. And so with that, massive deals have been passed out. You look at Tyreek Hill, he's traded to the Dolphins from the Chiefs. And you look at everything that he had done for Kansas City. They wanted to pay him. He wanted to be the highest paid guy. They couldn't get him all the way there. We talked about that. So pull back a little bit. We'll trade him. We'll try to get some value for him. All right. They got some nice value coming back. Kansas City, if they hit on their picks, they'll be able to retool up, have another 4 or 5, 6 year run with Mahomes. Hopefully kind of break that down again, then retool again. And they'll be able to kind of do that, 15 to 20 year run like they did New England with Tom Brady. That's the model. But Tyreek Hill, you're getting a massive deal, 4 years, 120 million, 72 guaranteed, plus the compensation the Dolphins sent back in draft capital ultimately to the Chiefs as well. So he gets a massive deal. Look at Devontae Adams, 5 years, 140, 67.5 million guaranteed, plus draft compensation going from the Las Vegas Raiders to the Green Bay Packers as well. And so they're giving up a ton for him. And then you look a couple of years ago, Stefon Diggs, they trade him from Minnesota ultimately to Buffalo. It works out well. You take the draft pick, you convert that into a nice young receiver. And with that, you have success. You keep your cap number down. Buffalo in more of a win now mode. They wanted a guy who wanted to get paid. And with that, they were going to pay him. So they pay Stefon Diggs, like a 5-year, $70 million deal. He's kind of been clamoring for a new one. Wants a bigger deal. They just got their stadium agreement. You got Josh Allen locked up. You feel like you're in a good place. You signed Von Miller. In Buffalo, they've been under the cap for a while, so they've been able to carry some cash and be able to kind of lay this thing out. And now all of a sudden they sign, they signed Stefon Diggs to a wonderful extension. It's a 4-year, $104 million extension, $70 million guaranteed. And this is new money in this deal. And so that puts him on par, right there with Devontae Adams, right there with Tyreek Hill. And frankly, that's where he should be. Doesn't have the size of Adams. He doesn't have the speed of Hill. But if you look at Stefon Diggs, he is a phenomenal route runner. He catches everything. And if you're at Buffalo, it makes perfect sense. The guy wants to be there. He loves Josh Allen. You have Josh Allen there, the quarterback. You got to give him the weapons. And for a long time, to be honest, playing in the NFL, guys didn't want to go to Buffalo. So Jim Kelly, the days with Andre Reed and Thurman Thomas and Bruce Smith, realistically, not a lot of people wanted to live there. It's a smaller market, but it's got an unbelievably passionate fan base, and they just couldn't get the quarterback position right for about 30 years. Well, finally, they got Josh Allen. You have a great coach in McDermott. You have a good defense. You've got Von Miller coming up there. I mean, you're checking a lot of the boxes. You're in a great situation now if you're the Buffalo Bills. And so it made sense to pay Stefon Diggs because of how good he is. And you look at your division. New England, they got to figure out what they've got with Mac Jones. The Jets are kind of always in a rebuild, but Miami, they're on the come up. They're working, they're investing. They still have picks into the future that they're going to be able to use if Tua is not their quarterback, but they have retooled that roster and they have some weapons now on the offensive side, and they still have that good defense that they had last year. Buffalo had to do this. And if you look at the money, this is always follow the money. And that's where the importance is in the NFL. It has shifted dramatically to that alpha dog receiver. And if you have that guy, you ultimately look and you pay him. And it makes sense because it makes your quarterback happy. It's an old saying one of my high school coaches used to tell me. And my defensive coordinator, my linebacker coach was giving me a compliment. My dad was my head coach. And so we didn't get a whole lot of those. My linebacker coach made a compliment. My D coordinator looked over at him and said, "You know what? You pat their butt too much, they crap in your hand." And, it's given Cincinnati some compliments. The Cincinnati Bengals, Katie Blackburn, who's running now, she's taken the reins really over from her dad, Mike Brown. And they've got Joe Burrow, who is one of the young stars now in the league. He'll be entering his 3rd year. They'll be able to start working on a contract extension after this season. They'll start getting that done. They've got Jamar Chase. He's going to be in a good spot. And this is what the Deshaun Watson contract did to a lot of people. It put the Ravens on notice. It ultimately is going to put the Bengals on notice. It's putting the Los Angeles Chargers on notice. Anybody who has a young quarterback who's good, they all see now, you're getting $230 million guaranteed on a 5-year deal. Everybody's going to want that. So you got to figure that out in Baltimore. Katie Blackburn, I came out, was positive with her. They're looking and exploring to build a new indoor. They're going to invest money. They're going to do all of these great things in the city of Cincinnati. And it seems like they were trying to shed the perception that they were a cheaper franchise and that they're here to stay and they're going to pay their guys and we're going to give them nice amenities and everything they need. Well, this is the problem. And all of a sudden, she's asked about the Lamar Jackson deal in reference, or the Deshaun Watson deal in reference to Joe Burrow's contract. And Frank, she comes out and says, "Listen, I haven't looked at it. Looks like a big deal. Maybe there's some voidable things from those guarantees," because that's what everybody wants to know. Are you going to be willing to guarantee the same way Jimmy Haslam did in the Cleveland Browns with their young star? And so maybe some voidable things for conduct or this or that getting out of the contract, because all owners and all front office, they want to make sure that they can get out of a bad deal should guys not perform. That is how it has always worked in the NFL. Nobody has wanted to try to give a guy a 5-year deal and then worry 3 years from now if he's hurt, if something happens, if their play dips, that they end up being like the NBA and Major League Baseball, where you've got these guys on these albatross contracts and ultimately they're not producing. And that's why the NFL has always been so incredibly efficient but times are changing, especially for the quarterbacks, because everybody knows you need that dude to compete. And Jimmy Haslam and the Browns finally did something that no one else has done to that length. And don't bring me Kirk Cousins, because I know he got a 3-year, about $90 million deal and has had guarantees lopped on. This is a mega contract, 5 years, 230. So she said she hadn't looked at it. I get it. But then she has two other comments. And this is where I begin to have some problems. And so you can see this here. She said, I don't focus on the guarantee as much, because in theory, if the player gets the money at the end of the day, that's what's important to him. So if the player is good enough and plays out the contract, he gets the money. She goes on to say, the thing is always giving us some pause is for the reason if things go badly. It's not fair for the team in the future if there's a large amount of money going to someone else with the way our system works today. We've always tried to balance that out. But we work in a world where we realize other contracts have some effects. So we'll just have to see where that all stands when it comes to be that time. At some point, we're going to pay the cap amount. So we just have to find a way to make that work and being in the best interest of the team. Well, yeah, that's what a guaranteed contract is. That's why players want them. That's why if you have a job, you would want a guaranteed contract. Everybody wants guaranteed dollars, that no matter what my performance is, I'm getting paid. And yeah, you get a guy like Joe Burrow, who's highly competitive. The guaranteed deal isn't what's going to drive him. He's going to go out there and work, and he's going to try to be the best regardless. And so being unfair to the team, it makes it sound like you're cheating the other players. The owners don't want to pay for lack of production. The front office, that's the problem. And so those comments, they're very troubling to think that someone would say that, because that's blatantly obvious. Everyone knows that when you sign up for something and you guarantee a deal, there's worry that if there's a failure to perform and you have to pay that out regardless, it's going to hurt. It's going to sting, and it might not necessarily be fair. And so I took Katie Blackburn last week and I said, great job. Way to talk about getting indoor. Way to talk about being an elite NFL franchise. Then you make the comments on the guaranteed deal for Deshaun Watson. Joe Burrow, he might not ask for that, but you should offer him a guaranteed deal. Whatever the market rate is in a year or 2 years, whenever you get that deal done, you should be offering him that, because he could have tried to big boy you and not come to Cincinnati in the draft first overall. He didn't do that. He came there. He's embraced everything. He's helped you recruit guys. He's done a great job. And heck, he took you to a Super Bowl, and he had you on the cusp of potentially winning one. So when it comes time to do his deal, I hope that we don't get caught up in, well, if he plays well, he's going to get all the money anyway. It's the perception of you taking care of players and the perception that you're getting market rate, just like everybody else in the league. And if you're better than them, getting a smidge more. And he'd probably even take a team-friendly deal, but make sure that it's guaranteed, because more quarterback deals will probably be guaranteed by that point in time than they are ultimately right now. We'll also touch on real quick Rob Gronkowski's comments and how he's not ready to commit to the season. My goodness, like, people want to know if Rob was going to play. They were talking to Gronk. He was talking about potentially coming back, intrigued by playing with Joe Burrow, said he had a lot of Brady in him, checking all these different boxes. And it seemed like Brady was going to be done. And so with that, it seemed like Gronk was going to be done. Said those guys are Brady and Gronk, like, mice and men, they're Lenny and George. That's what those two are. And so it was only if Tom was going to be retired would Gronk still have the passion to go pursue a Super Bowl somewhere else. Cincinnati, he threw out. That seemed pretty cool. Well, Tom is now back. And so everyone wants to know, are you going to play with Tom? I don't have that desire right now. Well, no doubt you don't have that desire right now, Gronk. We know you don't want to go through the offseason. Dude, we play together, which makes you old. And so your body's beat up. You just went through a season. You really don't want to go and travel around and do all that stuff with OTAs and everything. Maybe a little bit. Maybe Tom will call you at that point in time. But you don't want to go through the start of the offseason program. And you want to ease your way into OTAs. And yeah, the new coach, Todd Bowles, is there. But ultimately, it's going to be a lot of carryover and a lot of similarities with Bruce Arians. The offense is going to be the same because Byron Leftwich is still there as the OC. And so I get that. And so I laugh when Gronk gives me this, hey, I'm not ready to go. Hey, you know what, Gronk? Neither am I. Neither am I. And, but if someone called up and I could still physically do it, say, listen, get back to me May 1st, back to me the second or third weekend of May. I'll come out there, I'll lift, I'll run on my own, I'll be in decent shape, I'll hit a handful of OTAs, we'll do the mini camp, take some time off, and then let me get ready for the season. That's where Gronk's head's at right now. All right, there's a few more big stories in the NFL that I want to talk about. Two more in particular, one involving the Saints in Philadelphia, another one involving Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. Going to start with the Saints and the Philadelphia Eagles and a big trade that happened last week. And so you sit here and you look at this. Saints received in 2022, this upcoming draft, the 16th and 19th pick in the first round. Philadelphia essentially is getting, in this year's draft, the 18th pick from the Saints. They're getting their third rounder. In 2023, they get the Saints first rounder. And in 2024, they get the Saints second rounder. So in essence, you're going 2-for-1 in first round picks. You're swapping another first rounder. You're getting a second rounder later, another third rounder this year. And there's some sixth and fifths that are thrown in there. But the crux of it is this. As you sit here and look at this trade and you're thinking, why? Why would the Saints make this? I can only think of two reasons, both involving the quarterback position. You have Jameis Winston. They just re-signed, gave him a couple-year deal. Former first-round pick, very talented quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner out of Florida State, playing for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Goes there, sits around. Last year has a chance to play and looks pretty good before he gets hurt. He has some shortcomings. He's not Drew Brees. His accuracy has issues, but he has a strong arm. He can move a little bit, and maybe they think they improved enough to be able to make a run. And so these are the two possible options you have in New Orleans. Number one, you don't think Jameis is the guy. You signed him just as an insurance policy in case you can't go up and get the guy you want, or in case the guy you get ultimately doesn't become what you want to have. Because you have a pretty darn good roster outside of that. Michael Thomas should be back and healthy. You have a pretty good defense. You have Alvin Kamara. You're working on your offensive line. Like, you're in division. Yeah, there's Tom Brady, but Atlanta's in a rebuild. And we'll see who Carolina gets at quarterback. They have a pretty good roster outside of that. But there's, outside of Tampa, there's no real dominant team. And you look across the landscape of the NFC. NFC East doesn't have anybody that really scares you all that much. You've got the Packers in the North. And out West, yeah, West is pretty good. You've got San Francisco with Trey Lance or Jimmy G, whatever happens there. You've got the Cardinals. You've got the Rams. I mean, yeah, there's some good teams that are going to be going on out there, obviously, in the West. But it's not nearly as loaded as the AFC from the quarterback position. So you sit here and look at this, and maybe they think Jameis isn't the guy. They want to package those two picks because it's tough to get two trades done on trade day. And so here's why the Saints would ultimately do this. You make the trade with Philly now. You get the ammunition you need to be able to trade up later. So you have two picks. You don't want to try to get two done on draft day. That's really tough to do. And so you get the two picks. As you see how the draft falls and you have the quarterbacks that you like, then where they ultimately lay, then you can go up and get one of them. And you already have that first trade done, because to move up from where the Saints are, you're going to need to be able to package two first rounders this year and probably something else in the future. And so that gives them that ability. The second possibility is this. Maybe the Saints think Jameis Winston is their guy. And maybe they've analyzed this draft and they've mocked the heck out of it. And they're like, okay, there's going to be receivers going. There's not really any quarterback going super high, but we like how this thing's going to ultimately fall. And we think there's a lot of great players that should be available between picks 12 and 20. And so we're sitting there at 16 and 19, and we feel like we can get two really good players that'll ultimately help us right now and help develop Jameis Winston and the rest of our roster, because we think he could be the guy. And with that, we'll be able to have success. So those are kind of your two options right there. But it's a big deal. In Philadelphia, they're sitting there saying, hey, you know what? We don't necessarily love the draft this year. We'll give you a couple picks. We'll keep a first rounder. We can ultimately get a player. But we have Jalen Hurts. We like what he did as a quarterback. He took us to the playoffs, and so that's great. But this quarterback draft is kind of weak. It's kind of weak. You know, you got Pickett. You know, you're sitting here looking around, and it's like, all right, you got Corral. Okay, you know, you got Malik Willis. Like you're trying to check around, but there's no real generational guy that you're seeing. And so you know what? We'll let Jalen Hurts go again. We'll give him another player. We'll see how he can do. If he plays really well, then we got our quarterback and we're good and we can take other players in the future. If not, next year, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, you've got options. There's going to be a quote better quarterback crop into the future. So that's kind of how that trade breaks down. But there's a ton of teams this year and next year. They're going to have multiple first round picks. So anticipate a lot of movement over the next couple of years of the draft. Lastly, I want to finish up with this. You know, Deshaun Watson goes to Cleveland. They give up a lot to get him as far as draft capital. You give him the 5 years, $230 million. You know, that's all been well documented. He has the 22 accusations of sexual assault. Those are all dismissed criminally. Never even brought charges, never make it out of a grand jury. One of the interesting facets of this is going to be the civil case. And more information is going to be coming out. There's depositions, and the bar and the threshold for civil litigation is much lower than criminal. Now, I'm not an attorney. I've got an MBA. I've taken a couple of law classes when I was going through grad school, but I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in this. But what I do know is that Deshaun Watson's defense team and his PR team, he had 22 allegations against him. He was able to round up 18 women who had given him massages, who had said, you know, either, you know, A, he was very professional, or B, anything that happened was consensual. Now, they asked Deshaun Watson about this. He didn't want to talk about it. Said, hey, we issued the statement. These women are on the record. Nothing illegal happened with them. There's 22 people that say something did happen. Here's 18 people that say something didn't happen. And so as you sit there and look at that, like, all right, that's 40 women. That's a lot. Number one, as you're referencing, like, played in the NFL. Each city I went to, like, I tried to find someone who was good and very skilled at giving massages, someone who I was comfortable with, who I felt like did a great job. You talk to a lot of guys, do a lot of research. The only time I ever changed a massage therapist at any place was when I was in Dallas. In my last year, my massage therapist moved, and so I had to get a new one. I had the same girl for 4 years there, and a lady after that. When I was in Detroit, I had a lady there. New England, I went and saw a guy who was fantastic. But, like, I was very specific who handled my body. Deshaun Watson, okay. 40 women, that's a lot. It's a heck of a lot. But here's the bigger deal, is now a judge is ultimately saying in the civil case that he's going to have to come out and talk and speak about the relationships with those 18 women who signed affidavits or who came out and said, hey, everything that happened with him was very professional or consensual. And so they're going to have to define their relationship, define what happened. And Deshaun Watson's going to have to do that. Now, does that mean there's anything, quote, illegal that happened? No. But it is going to define some of those relationships. And this could look bad for him because that's going to have to go on the record. And I'll never sit here and say, you know, he's guilty or not. I have no clue of what happened. Only the people that were in that room did at any given point in time. But you have 18 women on one hand, 22 on another. That's 40 different encounters. About, 55%, 45%, each way. And so the fact that he now has to get on the record and talk about that, in the court of public opinion, it's not going to bode well. And it's not going to play great across the national football landscape. And so if he thought he was going to be able to get off with maybe a 2 or 4 game suspension, I anticipate that being more. Because now when you have 40, women who have given you massages 18 months, 2 years, I'm not sure on the timeline of how long that's went. That's a lot. And now you're going to have to define the relationship with almost half of them. And you were hoping to abstain and be able to stay silent. And you're not going to be able to do that anymore. The judge is forcing you to talk about it. And that is a BFD. That is a big deal because you have to go on the record and talk about this. And that's going to open up the possibility. And people who may have been on the fence, they're going to sit there and think, okay, well, maybe some of these other 22 women are telling the truth. And so that's something that's not necessarily great for Deshaun Watson. But that concludes this episode of Carps Corner. We're going to get you another one, a spring ball update coming up soon. There'll be more NFL news, going to be news across the world of sports. There's so much to talk about, so much going on. And thank you for all of your support. I really appreciate it. Continue to subscribe and tell your friends about Carps Corner. Thanks.